somehow this concept of connectivity is intimately linked to the concept of complexity. And so really what I'm saying is that the universe is getting its act together. It's connecting the dots. It's bringing everything into co-relationship with everything else. And somehow it does this through the production of consciousness. Consciousness is this integrative function in biology which takes data, which may appear profoundly unrelated, and in fact brings it into some kind of a congruent relationship.
The process from going from brain to mind is a difficult one.
It is important to study the brain, but you will never squeeze the essence of consciousness out of gray matter. You can squeeze it as a sponge as much as you want. You will never get experience flowing out of it because suddenly there is some special property of the neurons firing at 40 hertz or whatever else that might be that suddenly generates experience. And this is why philosophers have rightly pointed out for a long time that this is a very hard problem. In fact, it is so hard that I grant you it is impossible to solve that way.
Consciousness is, so the theory says, is causal power I have upon my own fate. If I have a mechanism like my brain in a particular state, how much can this brain be affected by its immediate past? And how much does the current state affect its immediate future? And the more a system can affect itself, the more it is conscious, the more it exists. That is what consciousness is. We live in a universe where physics is such that that every physical system has an external aspect that we study using physics and chemistry and biology. We can poke it and put it in a scanner and talk to it, etc. That's all behavior. But then it also has an internal aspect, what it feels like.
That's why for the last 50 years, I think we were on a wild goose chase trying to create a digital computer that can mimic the human brain. The human brain is a learning machine. It's quite different from a digital computer. So quantum mechanics does play a certain role in the human mind. Now, if you take a look at trying to model a neuron, realize that neurons are leaky. They're messy. They're not digital. They're not just on and off. Sometimes they leak. They have all sorts of deficiencies. Neurons are not totally deterministic. And I think that the narrower a neuron is, the more leakage you get. And these are quantum mechanical effects.
A computer is a subset of classical physics. It's discrete state, 0, 1, discrete time, t plus 1. It's a subset of classical physics. Everything that's algorithmic is a subset of classical physics, which is continuous state, continuous time. None of it's quantum mechanics. All algorithms are that. Okay? I think we can use the poise realm to create a system that is quantum, poise realm, and classical with the same sets of inputs and outputs and make a new kind of system that processes information in some sense, is dynamical, but isn't algorithmic. From what I've told you, I don't think we are either. We always use our most complex systems as our model of the mind. Right now it's a computer. If we can make what I'm calling a trans-Turing system, we'll have a new way of thinking about it. Thank you.
So that's really what I see non-duality is saying. It's not that the duality is an illusion, whatever. It's saying there is this real world, and we miss the fact there is also an underlying essence. And the question is, what is that essence? And it's interesting because he never defines the essence. He says, look within, explore yourself, and you will discover it. But he doesn't give it a name, which is true in many mystical traditions. They say, this essence, it cannot be given a name, it cannot be defined, and yet it is so familiar, we all know it so well, and by inquiring within, we can begin to discover for ourselves what that essence is.
I mentioned Roger Penrose and I have developed a theory of consciousness called ORC-OR. I don't have time to go into it now. It basically proposes quantum computation in brain neuron microtubules inside neurons. So rather than neuron-to-neuron communication, we're looking at a deeper level inside neurons to give a global sense of consciousness through quantum mechanics, which results in real-time causality and free will. We avoid the problem of epiphenomenal. It gives consciousness real-time control and a potential connection to fundamental space-time geometry, quantum space-time geometry, through Roger's objective reduction. This is consistent with Eastern spiritual traditions. Although Roger doesn't like to talk about it, I've taken the liberty of observing the implications of what he said and what we've said for consciousness for Eastern philosophy and other spiritual traditions. But skeptics said, well, living systems are too warm, wet, and noisy. Quantum coherence is destroyed by decoherence. But in the last 5 years, multiple lines of evidence, starting with photosynthesis, have shown that quantum coherence occurs in warm biological systems routinely. And the plants, the food we eat, all depend on quantum coherence. Plants absorbing photons, converting to chemical energy, utilizing quantum coherence. Also, recently, Anirban Bandyapati at the National Institute of Material Sciences in Japan has shown that there's megahertz coherence, quantum conductance, and topological qubits in microtubules at room temperature. Very exciting work. Quantum biology papers, conferences are popping up like flowers in the spring. Sessions at the American Physical Society, recently at Google, the Google Workshop on Quantum Biology, and elsewhere.
Measure it. The theory gives you a number called phi. That measure that can either be 0, which says the system doesn't exist, it doesn't feel like anything to itself, or it can be a positive number, unbounded in principle, that says how conscious the system is. Technically, how much intrinsic cause-effect power it has. The theory finally says, ultimately, conscious is causal power of a system upon itself. That is, at the most fundamental level, what consciousness is. So it relates to a theory of ontology, to what exists, the study of what exists.